Hold up, isn't this what the right was asking for? So I'm going through my videos for the day, and I come across this thumbnail, right? And I see BLM activist calls for black-only cities by breaking apart DC. And I go, okay. And he's a black-only autonomous zone. And I go, I don't like segregation. That's not good. I'm not a fan of enforced segregation. Then I realize, it's fucking Tim, and he's going to be hyperbolic and misrepresent things like he usually does and frame it as a bad thing to rile up the right, because that's basically all he does now, is just rile up the right. I go ahead and read what he's talking about, and he completely misrepresented what the guy said. I'm reading this bill or proposal he has. Surprisingly, this sounds exactly like what the right was asking for when they were asking for peaceful divorce. If you read it, he doesn't say anything about segregating the cities. So you got the right asking for all this peaceful divorce nonsense, or you got like the rural areas of Oregon wanting to redistrict and become part of Idaho because they feel misrepresented. Now you have these historically black cities. This guy's proposing that they do something similar, and now all of a sudden that's a no, you can't do that. That's segregation. So you know what? Let's actually go and look at what he said, and then I'm going to show you how this completely got misrepresented. So it's called the African American Autonomy Act of 2021. Now at the beginning, if this initiative is passed, it will preserve predominantly African American sections in DC as historically African American autonomous regions. I can see how that can trigger the white conservatives just off reading that part alone. Of course, Tim's article, he completely misrepresents it, and then for some reason to look really stupid, reads parts of it that disprove his own headline. You should go watch it. It's ridiculous. But the three main predominantly African American sections in DC that this bill would like to preserve are east of the Anacostia River, Lagon Park, Brentwood area, Northeast DC, and the Colonial Village and Shepherd Park, and Northwest DC. Langdon Park and Brentwood would be combined into one autonomous region. The same would be done to the Colonial Village and Shepherd Park. Other predominantly African American neighborhoods would be eligible to be African American autonomous regions as well, and they would be turned into their own cities. Of course, I'm like, well, that's vague. I don't know what they mean by autonomous region. It goes down to define it. According to the World Atlas, autonomous regions are sections of a nation that have a decree of independence in several issues, not all, several issues, and may result because of several reasons. An autonomous region has control over its affairs and has the freedom to make decisions independent of external oversight. An area may be granted autonomy if it is situated in a sizable distance from the rest of our nation, or if the population of the area consists primarily of minority communities. Now, to be fair to all my friends on the right, I was totally for the rural areas breaking away from the cities and being able to run themselves. And the rural cities and the areas have to negotiate with each other, and the cities don't get to extract everything from one side and just take it. So I was for the redistricting, and so was the right. Now this is sort of doing pretty much the same thing, but with historically black cities that were being represented by white people from outside the community, and now the right's like, oh no, we can't do that. This is why I don't like when the right has this, they always do this, we're all Americans things. We're all in this together. As soon as it comes to black people, all of a sudden, wow, black people, you guys need to sort your communities out. Oh, all that crime, you guys need to sort your community. It's all of a sudden we're not all Americans now, right? Same thing here. We should be able to govern ourselves because we live differently than you do. To the rural people. Okay. Black people. We want to be represented by people from within the community. Now the ignorants be mad. Why? There is nothing in here that says white people can't come into the city, black people can't leave the city, they have to go to different... There's nothing in here that says that. There's nothing in here about segregation. They even admit the cities are not all black cities. And what is the other 10%? It doesn't say they have to leave. We'll just go on. Look. These African American autonomous regions would be turned into their own cities with their own mayor and city council members operating separately and free from control by the present DC government. I'm okay with this for almost every city to run and govern themselves. I don't care what color it is. So I got no problem with this if a historically black city wants to run itself. It doesn't say full autonomy. It says on certain issues. We already do that to an extent. Anyway, it goes on to go into the city demographics of being 90% black. And, you know, Brentwood 75%, you know, there we just putting out demographics. To deny African Americans autonomous regions in DC would be denying us our basic human rights. Well, I think every community should basically govern itself. I basically dissolve the powers to as small as possible. And then it goes on to talk about how black people should be under the label of indigenous people and be able to form something kind of similar to reservations, but not really. Now, I want all of my other hardcore, like, conservative friends, especially if you got, like, you're a white conservative watching this, I want you to take this black and white, you know, I want you to replace this with urban and rural. And I want you to reread this as urban and rural and see if you agree with it. All right. King and Malcolm X said that Black America was a colony. In 1963, the ballot or the bullet speech, Malcolm X stated that white power structures controlled the economy, housing, business, jobs, and education system in African American neighborhoods. Is he wrong? Now again, if we expand this out to a state, do the cities not control what the rural areas do? I'm in California. Yes, they do. All right, and that's why a lot of the rural areas want to break off. Same thing in Oregon. All right. In 1960s, the doctor said the northern ghetto had become a type of colonial area. The colony was powerless because all the important decisions affecting the community were made from the outside. We are a colony to this day. Interest groups who do not live in the African American communities, such as DC, such as Berry Farms or Brooklyn Manor, control the public housing there and made decisions to demolish it and kick hundreds upon hundreds of African Americans out of their homes. You see, now let's apply this again to the urban areas, making laws that make no sense for the rural areas of that same state. This is the same exact idea, but instead of urban versus rural, it's historically black areas versus everywhere else. Okay, they go on to say, autonomy is not segregation. And then goes into define it, but real quick, what does this say? Calls for black-only cities. All right, you see my problem with this? You see my problem with this hyperbolic rhetoric? The right needs to stop this. Because I guarantee you, everybody who watched this, I will say most, sorry. Most of the people on the right watchers didn't even look up the original Autonomy Act. But let's go back to it, because I just want to point that out. African autonomy is not segregation. African autonomy is the simple act of African people controlling the institutions in our communities. This initiative would not prevent African Americans from being able to travel to the rest of DC, west of the Anacostia River. As mentioned earlier, the United Nations states that indigenous people have the right to their own autonomous regions and to be citizens in the country that they were exiled to, in this case, America. This bill would not prevent white people and non-African Americans from being able to travel east of the river. An example would be how today there are Native American reservations that non-Native Americans are allowed to visit. I believe white people should have the right to control institutions in their community. They already do control. I believe Latinos and Asians should have the right to control the institutions in their community as well. And I will be charitable and extend that. Obviously, mixed communities should run their own places as well. They areas in California. There are areas in California that are very mixed. First area, when I first moved to LA when I was a little kid, the mostly black area. Then moved to a black Hispanic area, and I was living like right on the line between the black side and the Hispanic side. If the black and Hispanic people of that community want to run that together the way that they think the community needs to be run, I don't think people, like, for example, say, I don't know, in downtown, in City Hall, who then go and live in Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, should be making decisions for what that community needs to be doing. The people that live in the area should decide what needs to be done in that community. All races should have the right to control the institutions in their community. Unfortunately, African Americans continue to be systemically prevented from controlling institutions in our communities. This is why this initiative is being proposed. So his problem, again, is you have people from outside of the community making decisions that affect inside the community. That is the issue. Could have you possibly worded this a little better? Probably. There's probably better ways you could have worded this so you didn't have to get the explosive headlines. But again, this is why I say this. If we just phrase this again as urban versus rural, this is exactly what the right has been asking for. That's the thing. This is why I don't get why the right is angry about this. You guys want an even more extreme version of this. You want to break apart the US completely. These people just want to run their own communities. Because they're saying, I'm not being represented by the state government. I know DC's not a state, but you get what I mean. We're not being represented by the higher ups, so we want to make them our own. Okay. They're not trying to break away from the US. They want more control over their communities. I don't see a problem with that. Again, phrasing it as the Black Autonomous Zone may be a little bombastic because you know the right's going to take that, spin it out of control. But again, it's the same thing they've been asking for to a lesser degree. It's just now that it's black people, they're mad about it. All I'm saying is keep it consistent. If you say you want to break apart things because we're not being represented how we run, why can't they do that too? Because they're not segregating, not doing anything like that. I see the same thing on the right where you see all the people from the country, the people from the city moving in, and they're saying we should throw them out if they're from the city because we don't want them voting a certain way. Okay, it goes back to that thing where it's we're all Americans, we're all in this, until it's black people, and then all of a sudden it's you guys gotta figure your shit out. They go, okay, and now you're saying no. There you go. You're the ones who always saying Democrats are controlling and destroying the black communities. Okay, so wouldn't you want them to run themselves? Not fully independent of the US. That's not, again, not what they're saying. They're not saying fully independent of the US, but more control over the community. They have to answer less to state regulations and more to what their own community is. If the regulation doesn't make sense in their community or hurts it, they want to go, hey, we don't want to have to deal with that. I got no problem. If some white community in the middle of Ohio wants to do it too, okay. Now again, I'm going to specify this. When you get into enforced segregation, that's where I have a problem. That's where I go, no, we're not doing that. But as far as this, I don't see that big of an issue with it. Especially because, let's be honest, nothing's going to come of this. This is not going to go anywhere. So I don't see why you're complaining about this when you actually have real shit to complain about. Anyway, I'll cut it here. Otherwise, I'm going to rant forever. But anyway, you know, stay safe, don't get shot, all that good stuff.